It's Monday, March 25th. I'm Adam Walsh, and this is The Signal. Today's show embraces spirituality, tradition, and family. We will look at the practices of both Lent and Ramadan. So Ramadan Mubarak, everyone, and may you have a blessed Holy Week. And for all of you listening today, if you observe Lent or Ramadan, get in touch. We'd love to hear about your memories growing up, right? What was it that you used to give up for Lent as a kid? Or perhaps you want to talk about a Good Friday tradition, or what were some of your favorite family iftar memories, right? It's the whole thing here today on The Signal. The numbers to call, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255, thesignal@cbc.ca for emails. Full house here today. Plus, we've got a couple calls lined up, so there's lots of spiritual talking to be done. Bonnie Morgan is here again. Welcome back. So you're not here with the library this time.
No, that's right. Change of
taste. You did bring a book.
I did. Can't get away from books.
Very on point. Tell us about the book.
So I brought along a copy as a giveaway of my book called Ordinary Saints, Women, Work, and Faith in Newfoundland. And it looks at lived religious practices in our province, mid-20th century, and just how people embraced and interpreted and adapted official religion in a meaningful way, and how that was tied to women's work, especially in the household and the community.
And folks, we're going to give away a copy of the book today. So if either if you call in or if you want to email and just, what some of you sometimes do when I do this, you just put in the subject heading book, which is always my favorite. So if you do that, we'll put your name in a hat and we'll draw for the book. thesignal@cbc.ca. Father Tony Biggood, how you doing?
Good. Thank you, Adam.
And it's St. Teresa's Roman Catholic Parish.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about yourself now as we're doing intros as we go around.
So I was born and raised in the West End of St. John, so I'm a proud West Ender. And I work at St. Teresa's. I work as a chaplain at the Health Sciences and adjunct faculty at Queen's College, and do a lot of work in the Archdiocese in adult education and faith formation.
Excellent. And we've got Reverend, also with PhD, Joanne Mercer. How you doing?
Good.
And tell us about yourself then.
I'm the provost at Queen's College, the Faculty of Theology. There is a theological school in Newfoundland, and it's one of the oldest in Canada. So always check us out. I'm a priest with the Anglican Church from central Newfoundland, and my expertise area is not Lent, but I love Lent. I'm one of those strange people who loves the season of Lent. I'm always happy to talk about it.
Excellent. And also we have Aisha Shule Akinturk, Executive Member of the Muslim Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. How are you doing?
Thank you so much.
Tell us a bit more about yourself.
Well, I'm a Canadian Muslim of Turkish origin, and I have been living in this beautiful province for almost 22 years now. I'm a mother to a young, handsome boy who was born and raised here. Most of my time is about community volunteering. So as you mentioned, I'm an executive volunteer member for the Muslim Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. And also as an academician, I try to get involved in different research projects. The latest one is about the history of Muslims in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I'm excited about being able to share the results, the findings very soon, hopefully.
Oh, very soon. So we're talking weeks or months? What's very soon?
Months, maybe.
Months?
Yeah, because we are in the process of publishing a book, and it takes
takes a bit.
Yeah.
Want to start us off because we'll when we do these shows, I like doing some definitions and context for folks, right? So let's start with Ramadan, just for the explainer of just the start of it, and then I guess some of the details around the spirituality of it.
Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to share some basic facts about what Ramadan is. So as we all know, September is the 9th month of the calendar that we are using in most parts of the world, including here in Canada. Ramadan is the name of the 9th month of another calendar, which we call Islamic lunar calendar. Okay, but unlike September, it rotates between different seasons. We know that September is always in the fall, but it's not the case for Ramadan. So it rotates between different seasons, and also the start day of Ramadan each year shifts by 10 days. So it's always about 10 days earlier than previous years. So this year it started on the 10th of March, and then we are almost midway through the Ramadan. And I will talk about the spiritual aspects maybe when we have a chance later on. Yeah.
Okay, that's the start. Excellent. Who wants to? So, for all of you who've been studying up here, who wants to tackle the Lent definition? They're all looking at each other, wondering.
Lent is a season of preparation for Easter.
Yeah.
I think technically it comes from the idea of length, the lengthening of days towards.
So it had that Newfoundland pronunciation from the get-go.
Oh, yes, right from the get-go. And so it like Advent, it's a season of preparation. And I think it was at the Council of Nicaea that it sort of became, because I did do my research, became sort of a part of the sort of official teaching. It would have in the early church been a period of preparation for people who were going to be baptized at Easter, and then it became more widely practiced in the wider church.
What are the differences between, if we're talking like Anglican versus Catholic? Like, are there many differences, or for any of the others either?
I know in our Catholic tradition, it's the same. It comes from the same root, obviously, and so it is that preparation, and of course, as Joanne said, that preparation for people who are wanting to be baptized. I think I'm not sure of the differences, but maybe in terms of the practices. Like, I know in our tradition, in our denomination, things such as celebrating the Stations of the Cross on a weekly basis, like people would come to the church to do that. I don't know if that's part of. Okay, Joanne's shaking your head, so that's one difference there. In terms of the practices of fasting, almsgiving, and prayer, I would think that those would be very similar, as well as those kind of penitential practices to help focus the mind and the body in terms of the spirituality of the Lenten season and preparing for Easter and the celebrations of Holy Week, which we're doing this week. So I think there's probably some small differences, but not a lot of differences.
Our call is a call to self-examination, prayer, penitence, fasting, almsgiving, and the reading and meditation on the Word.
Right. Yeah.
Bon, any thoughts to add on that?
No, I think the essence is it's that kind of getting ready to enter the mystery of Easter. So it's one of the sort of great times of the church year. So, and it is, a kind of, it's meant to be a spiritual preparation. I mean, all of the, self-denial, the additional prayers, and we would have additional weekly services. So you may not do a weekly Stations of the Cross, but in a weekly, an additional, usually Wednesday night service would be part of Lenten, the season of Lent in the Anglican tradition.
So what's the role of fasting here? What's the thought behind it?
Well, for our tradition, fasting is a spiritual practice. It's a long-held spiritual practice that covers many different religions. It's not unique to Christianity.
I think it's pretty much everyone,
yeah,
really.
Exactly. The idea behind it is that one would not eat, or one would fast from certain things. It may be food, it may be other things, basically to create room within the soul or the spirit to contemplate, to meditate, to pray on, and to draw closer to God, to pray on, for example, the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus that we're going to celebrate in Holy Week. I think it's also to motivate people to say, okay, if I'm focused on myself, if I'm living my life day in and day out and kind of thinking about my own life, my own worries, to go without something not only creates space for prayer, but it also creates space to keep in mind others' needs. And kind of an outward focus is what it's meant to be like. I mean, growing up, for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to give up chips for Lent. That wasn't exactly highly enlightened, right? But it's what we did,
Yeah, for me, it was like chocolate, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, was it?
Right?
Okay. Chips was very hard for me.
Or I may have been ambitious one year as a child and said junk food, all of it, but I don't know how I did with it.
Right, no, exactly. But later on, it might be, well, I'm going to try to fast from maybe more of a judgmental attitude or more negative thinking. Some people take on something new in Lent. So it's not necessarily, there's a nice, interesting comparison between fasting and feasting in Lent. And so you might fast from criticism. You might feast on being more complimentary to other people, those kinds of things.
Aisha, what about yourself for fasting?
Okay. So first of all, let me mention that, as Muslims, we believe that the Holy Quran is God's last divine revelation to humankind. And it is in the Quran that we find the explanation and the purpose of Ramadan. So when you ask why Ramadan is so sacred for Muslims, the answer lies in the Quran itself. So the most important reason is that the descent of the Quran from the heavens took place during Ramadan. Therefore, we consider Ramadan as a special month during which we welcome that very special, unique guest, the Quran, the divine revelation, into our hearts, our minds, and our daily routines. Okay? So imagine that you are about to host a very important person to your homes, okay? I don't know about you, but my first reaction would be go and clean and tidy my room as much as possible, right? We will also try to free ourselves from time-consuming bad habits, right? We may even end up eating and sleeping less so that we can spend more quality time with our guests, right? So being mindful of our guests has a great potential to make us less selfish and more caring people. In that sense, Ramadan is a time when we practice that mindfulness as we welcome the Quran into our hearts, minds, and daily routines. Like most people know Ramadan as a month of fasting, which is true. But we also learn in the Quran that fasting was not prescribed only for Muslims. It was also prescribed for all previous generations of believers before us so that they may become mindful and conscious of their Creator. Because when we get busy in our daily lives, when we get distracted by the needs of our physical bodies, right, we may forget about the soul. We may forget about our spiritual needs, our connections with our Creator. So when we fast during Ramadan, we abstain from various physical needs and desires, including eating, drinking, and intimacy with our spouses, from dawn to sunset. Instead, we spend more time in praying and doing good deeds. So for a month, I can say that we go through an intensive training that makes us fit for spiritual purification. Something that is often forgotten about Ramadan is that it's also a reading camp.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we recite the Quran day and night to better receive and process the divine revelation, the guidance. Because in our other times, we are, again, so busy that we forget about the manual, of our lives. Because we are also fasting at the same time, we don't get distracted by our physical needs and desires, and it becomes easier for us to delve into the depths of the Quran, the divine revelation. And I think this may sound a little bit abstract, but I will give the example of someone who likes spending time in a library, okay? I'm sure those of us, our listeners who love doing that, will understand better. So libraries give us, space and the quietness that we need to meaningfully engage in a book, right? Even if we are not allowed to eat or drink in that space, okay, while we are there, we really don't mind because they help us to focus on the book itself. Also, reading the book is such a feast for the soul, okay? We don't mind, eating physical food. At the end of the day, when the librarian says we are closing, right? We may be ending the library as a lighter person who didn't eat or drink for a few hours, but as a more complete and wholesome person, right? Similarly, when we observe Ramadan, we are subject to some restrictions for a certain number of hours during the day. But this is so only to help us to connect with our Creator through a reading, more focused reading of the Holy Quran. Another tradition or regular activity that we are engaging in during Ramadan is night prayers. So if you happen to be around, Masjid al-Nur by Logi Bay Road, you will notice that, it gets much, much busier at night time during Ramadan because it's the time for Taraweeh prayers. So the members of the community gather to pray, and our imams recite the entire Quran. We try to finish the entire Quran. So it's a much longer prayer because we divide the entire Quran into 30 days, 30 nights. So it's a long reading. But even families with children, young children, they make an effort to attend because this gives them a sense of belonging to a community, spiritual community who pray together, who reflect together. I remember, the little babies or toddlers, they are quietly napping, in a cozy corner, and their mothers or fathers, they are standing up in prayer. So I can say that as the rest of the city is sleeping, we are awake, reflecting on the signs and guidance of our Creator, throughout the Ramadan.
Thank you for that. Let's go to the phone lines. We've got the Vice President of the Muslim Students Association for Memorial University on the line, Jeanette Navid. How you doing?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good. So I got in touch with you because today's show we're talking about Ramadan, we're talking about Lent. We're also asking folks for memories from growing up that they can share. And I know you've got a couple that you were going to share with us. What's one from you mentioned from growing up back home?
Right. So growing up back home, and even now, Ramadan is a very special part of our lives. So back home, I think the most prominent memories are those of us, having iftar together with our families. And, a couple hours after iftar, we have to go to the mosque for our nightly prayers. So just getting together and experiencing all of that, those are the most prominent memories. And then some of us would also stay awake all night till suhoor time, which is till dawn. So, just getting to spend that kind of time with your families and reflecting on the purpose of Ramadan, like why we're doing what we're doing, fasting from dawn till dusk. I think those are some of the most prominent memories.
And what's it like being here as a student? Because when you're away from home, right, you look for folks to create, in a way, new family, new connections, and to keep some of these traditions around that are so important spiritually and also just on a person-to-person surface level, too. What's it been like with the Student Association and what you're doing?
For sure. So I've been associated with the MSA for, I'd say, 4 to 5 years now. And what I've found is that a lot of students, when they first come here, especially in their first year, their first Ramadan away from home, they start to feel very isolated. Some of them even fall into depression. And that's why MSA for the past almost 2 decades now, they've been organizing iftars on campus just to bring all the students together so they don't feel so isolated. So they have that opportunity to create their own family, their friends here, to connect with like-minded people. So that's been something that's been a great memory for me here in the past couple of years, and we're still doing that this year. And every year I get to see so many new faces, so many new people who cherish this gathering that we have on campus every day, and it's just the most wholesome experience.
I know you have a meeting in a couple of minutes. I just want to say thanks so much for making the time to come on the show.
Yep, no worries. Thank you so much.
All right. Jeanette Navid there, the Vice President for the Muslim Students Association, Memorial University. I've got one more person on the phone before we get back to the guests here in studio. It's my pal, my colleague, Riva Rashid in Happy Valley Goose Bay. How you doing?
Hi, Adam. I'm good. How are you?
Good, man. Good. This is your first Ramadan in Happy Valley Goose Bay. I know, how's it been going? Because it's the journey from even St. John's up and getting established and everything else. How are things?
Things are not really positive. The reason I'm saying this because I think Dr. Aisha can confirm with me that having Ramadan alone is pretty difficult.
Yeah.
Because you don't feel that. I'm just feeling that I'm not eating. But I'm not, because we don't have night prayers, like we don't have any Taraweeh here, we don't have any mosque, so I'm missing out on those prayers. I'm praying myself at my places, but it's kind of hard to feel the essence of Ramadan alone.
You've reached out. I know there's potential for a community. What have you been hearing from some folks?
Yeah, so here in Happy Valley Goose Bay, actually, we have less than 30 Muslims. So we don't have a community in that sense. We don't have intercommunication between each other. But in Labrador West, I've recently heard just 2 days ago that in Labrador West, they have a mosque and they have a fair size of community where they come together to pray. And also on the weekends, they do iftar together. So probably I might have iftar with them and also an eat prayer they're trying to host. So I might join them there.
Before I let you go, can you share a memory from back home growing up? Because you mentioned something about everyone's mom sending them out with a plate.
So any Muslim, I think this is a culture in any Muslim countries, so it can be in Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, anywhere. So what used to happen that my mom, right 5 to 10 minutes before iftar, my mom would give me a couple of plates. So something 2 or 3. So I was a kid that time. So he would give me the plates. She would give me the plate and tell me that, okay, drop these iftar plates to your neighbor's house, but remember to bring the plate back. So that's the catchphrase. You'll have to remember that. Bring the plate back. So what we used to do as a kid, we'd go there, stand at the door, and with the teary eyes, that auntie. So that's what we'd call that auntie. In Bengali, if I say that ammu plate dite bolche, so mom said to give the plate back. So transfer the food and give the plate back. That's the fondest memory I have of Ramadan from back there.
Thank you so much. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's been a long day for you as always. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Ramadan Mubarak, and I'll be in touch soon.
No problem, Adam. Ramadan Mubarak.
All right, Riva Rashid, host of Labrador Morning. So like it's from moving somewhere, right? Somewhere new, and then you've got the fun connections of memories and thinking about bring the plate back. Any thoughts?
Well, actually, yes, it's a very common thing, for moms to ask the plates back. But in my part of the world, when I was born and growing, there is also this tradition of, letting your neighbor keep the plate, okay, or the neighbor preferring to keep the plate so that they can return it not empty, but with some other kind of food. So return back, to your neighbor. So in my case, I remember one of my close Nigerian friends here in the community. Once she sent me a plate of beautiful, dish she made. So it was so beautiful that I had to hold onto the plate until I decide what to cook and send her back. So at the end of 1 week or so, she called me back asking for her plate, either empty or full. But I was able to send it full, and she enjoyed my cooking too.
Yeah. What I think is really interesting is seeing across different religions and different traditions the centrality of women and women's work and food preparation, and women being central to the celebration and the observance of these particularly holy times of spiritual development, spiritual preparation within different religious traditions. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's so relatable it doesn't matter who you are, where you are. It's like sending out a plate, no matter where on the planet, right? And whether it's fill it up to bring it back or go get the plate back or don't forget the plate, but it's all sending out plates of food.
And the message that sends, like food is so essential for us. I mean, literally for survival. But you're thinking about the person, you're nourishing them. It's a tremendously comforting gift of food at any time in life, but certainly in these holy seasons. It's a way to bring people together.
So then, let's stay with food and thoughts around celebration and holy seasons, right? What from your lives do you remember or interesting bits of, now, like I said, maybe it's the giving up of chips or something for Lent or something else towards like a Good Friday fish and chips or anything else,
Well, in our family, during Lent, Catholics tend to traditionally have fish on Wednesdays and Fridays.
Yeah.
So growing up, much to my shame now, I didn't like fish. I now love fish. I love fish so much. But anyway, when Mom would make fish, this was, you'd feel like, oh my God, like Lent is, we always had to go through this every year. We're forced to eat fish, right? And so my Mom would cheat a little bit and get fish sticks, which is very embarrassing now. But there was that sense of which, in Lent, you do things that some, not hurt, but certainly it was something that something that you'd necessarily enjoy. Right? And that was one of the messages of Lent growing up as a child. And I mean, now I have a much deeper appreciation for that. But that was one of the things that I remember you dreaded Wednesdays and Friday nights at supper time.
Well, can you mute that there, John Pike? That's just Rivu doing a practice in Labrador. I was like, whose amazing voice is this? Oh, it's Rivu Rashid doing some kind of rehearsal. Anyways, Father Biggood, go ahead.
So it was that. Another memory I have is, I don't think we do it anymore, but we used to get these paper folders at the beginning of Lent. They were called self-denial folders. And you would put like quarters or dimes or something every day, you know, and then that went to I think it went to the parish, but again, it was this kind of taking some money in a conscious way, contributing it to something other than yourself. And as kids, we loved doing that, you know. Yeah. And then every week, you know, the folder got heavier and heavier because as the quarters got added to it. And I think at one point they upped it to fit a loonie in there. Yeah. So that's another memory I have. Yeah.
Yeah, and you tape them in.
Oh, yes, that's right. You tape them in. And then you tape the whole folder up so nothing falls out, right?
Yeah. And I can remember we'd have adult folders and children's folders. So the children's ones, I believe, held a dime. And I remember them being really beautiful, like as a little girl, the decoration on them, the kind of, you know, lavenders and yellows and greens and very spring-like when we have, you know, green Christmas, white Easter usually. So I remember the colors being really beautiful. And I think something we no longer use. I don't think I've seen those folders in a long time. And I think there's something lost there because it is a daily reminder. It wasn't so much the amount of money. Yeah, that was part of it. But it was also the daily ritual of putting that dime, putting that quarter, a loonie, whatever the case may be, into the folder, which was that kind of reminder of the daily practice of Lent and the preparations. So it just kept reminding you that you were in Lent and it was a special time.
Like a small ritual. That
exactly,
ritual
a
helps
personal
remind
ritual.
you that this is a different time.
Yeah.
I'm Adam Walsh. This is The Signal. Today we are talking about, well, if you observe Lent, if you observe Ramadan, we're talking about both religious practices and spirituality on the show today. So we'd love to hear about your memories from growing up. You know, what did you used to give up for Lent as a kid? Or perhaps it's a good Friday food tradition. I don't know, you know, fish and chips, anyone? Or also, what were some of your favorite family iftar memories? Give us a call, 709-722-7111, 1-800-563-8255. You can text us, 709-327-8206. Emails, thesignal@cbc.ca. Here in studio, we've got Bonnie Morgan, author of Ordinary Saints, Women, Work, and Faith in Newfoundland. And we've got a book to give away, so any texts or messages we get, we'll draw names out of a hat at the end of the show. And I will mail you, as said, a book if you would like it. We also have Father Tony Biggood here of St. Teresa's Roman Catholic Parish, Reverend Joanne Mercer, Provost, Queen's College, and Aisha Shule Akinturk, executive member of the Muslim Association of Newfoundland and Labrador. We've mentioned iftar a lot. Can you just explain it a bit?
Sure. During Ramadan, we Muslims eat only twice a day. So iftar is the meal, is the time when we break our fast, you know, at the sunset. And the sahur is the early breakfast we have before dawn. Okay, so our Muslim community here in this province is very diverse. We come from different ethnic, cultural backgrounds. It's very international. While most of us are third, second generation Canadians, some of us, you know, have been living here for less, you know, and we still keep the memories, remember the memories of our childhood, Ramadan childhoods. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a Canadian Muslim of Turkish origin. So I was born in the beautiful historical city of Istanbul.
Oh, wow.
And I remember, probably your listeners would also know that we are known for beautiful historical mosques with huge courtyards, parks around them. So, very neighborly communities. So I remember going to the Taraweeh prayers with our families, after iftar. And then after the Taraweeh prayer is over, we would stroll the streets, because the city would be awake, The shops would be open, the coffee shops, bakeries, ice cream shops, because back then although Ramadan changes from one season to another, the advantage of being in a milder climate is you can afford eating ice cream all year long, right? So we would have ice cream vendors on the streets, bazaars, children's shows, puppet shows, story times, set up for us. So we would stroll the streets and enjoy the spirit of Ramadan that is extending beyond the boundaries, walls of our homes or mosques. And we would not worry about waking up early for sahur, later at night, because we had this tradition of Ramadan drummers.
Oh, wow.
So every neighborhood was assigned with a drummer who was very artistically skilled, They volunteered their time to go out and stroll the streets with their drummers. They would recite, very nice stories, poems, related to Ramadan, sometimes very funny stories that can relate to the people living in that street, So we would wake up to their, sounds and, to their drumming, and we would never miss a sahur. In terms of food, there is no restriction as long as it's permissible in Islam. We can eat anything in moderation, of course. But depending on where you are from, you can have different cuisines, displayed on your table, dinner table. So we typically break our fasts at iftar with a piece of date, and a sip of water, and then we take a break. We don't go immediately to eating the dinner. We take a break for evening prayer. So we perform the evening prayer and we come back to the dinner table to eat with our family members and friends, a nice meal. And then we go to the mosque. And at sahur time at midnight, we eat a very light breakfast. But I remember my dad, who passed away many years ago, may God bless him. He was a very big fan of rice, so he would eat rice even for sahur.
Okay, right.
I couldn't.
No.
Yeah.
I remember the one iftar with a friend of mine in university, right? So he was originally from Afghanistan, came here. Well, he actually went from Afghanistan to Buren and grew up there for a couple of years, and then went to Memorial University. And he invited me over for iftars, and he made the joke, and we were saying before the show, right? So he's like, "Oh, Adam, I hope it's okay. I couldn't taste it all day." I'm like, "Okay, Ajmal, thanks." And so we had dates, and then afterwards when we had the food, fantastic food. He did salt it properly, even though I couldn't taste it, and also tea too. And it was, yes. And for me, I tend to drink tea without any sugar. My buddy Ajmal was like, "How much sugar do you want?" I was watching. I'm like, "I think he just put like 6 or 7 scoops in there." Like that was it was very sweet, but very nice mint tea.
Yes. So another Ramadan tradition is the special kind of pita bread that make exclusively for Ramadan. So before the iftar, a family member is supposed to go and grab it from the local bakery. It's not like, big grocery stores here. Every street almost has their own bakery store, which is open until early morning. So they bake freshly. So you have fresh pita bread on your table, which is great. And coffee and tea is a must after iftar, because you need to stay awake for the Taraweeh prayer, right? And so you could smell, all these different smells, food, beverages, bread, freshly baked bread, coffee, freshly brewed coffee, Turkish coffee especially, all along, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, and before I go back, what's your favorite ice cream flavor from growing up?
I think vanilla, yeah.
Okay. Right.
And a little bit of touch of chocolate, maybe.
Okay, love it. Any other thought? Oh, actually, Bonnie, I was going to ask you about seals. I was at we have a current affairs meeting at CBC every day around 2:00. So whenever on Friday, I was like, "What are you doing for Monday?" So I told him, and I mentioned the seal bit, and then the discussion for 15 minutes ensued, and then I was sent links later in the day and everything. So can you fill us in?
Yeah. So this was thinking about Good Friday and how people would not eat meat on Good Friday. So it would be, food traditions around things like molasses and dumplings as a meal, fish meals. But one thing that was really interesting is people who could eat seal on Good Friday, because seal was not meat. It came out of the salt water.
Comes out of salt water, must be a fish.
It must be a fish. So they were allowed to eat seal on Good Friday, which to me is mind-blowing. But at the time that was, it's okay. It's not really meat per se because it comes from the water.
And I think seabirds too. Tur and
Good feed of tur on Good Friday. There you go.
Interesting. I hadn't heard of that before, so that's interesting. Yeah, it's like different parts of the island. I think that's what I found interesting in my research. So in sort of agricultural, kind of more agricultural areas, I really saw like the dumplings and molasses as a meal. So that was, and people, some kids didn't think that was fast at all. That was like the best day of the year. It was go-by day. Yeah. So that was the finest day of the year because you had, dumplings and molasses for lunch or for supper. But salt herring could have been a meal. I know when I was growing up, it was salt fish, so watered fish, and raisin bread, so molasses raisin bread or white raisin bread, but we had no grease. There was no butter on Good Friday at all. So you had your plain fish, you had your plain bread, no butter. Okay. So for me, the tradition of fish and chips is foreign on Good Friday because it's greasy. And avoiding grease. You wouldn't even have like scrunchions on if you had fish and brews, because that's grease. It was plain without any sort of fat.
An interesting point on the seal thing, which is really interesting how culture impacts religious practice. So I'm not going to have all the facts on this correct, but the Roman Catholic bishop, I think it was Bishop Fleming, but I'm not sure, going back a long time ago, because seal was such an important part of the Newfoundland diet, he actually petitioned Rome for an exemption for Roman Catholics in Newfoundland to eat seal, because it would have been considered sinful. And it was granted.
That's pretty good. Yeah, opening that letter in Rome, it's like, I wonder what.
Exactly.
Sure.
Which is really interesting, just how the culture influenced the religious practice.
Yeah, for what's available at the time, right?
Right.
So your thoughts then, like as we move up now, into Holy Week, personally, where are your thoughts this time of year?
Yeah, I think it's the most sacred time of year, and I said earlier how much I love Lent, particularly because I think it's like a reset. It's like Marie Kondoing your spiritual life. Like take a look at what's getting in the way, what's blocking your joy, what's blocking possibility of you entering fully into new life in spring and for a new life of Easter, and so. Yeah, I think it's not too late. It's Holy Week, to enter into that time to think about, because all the practices tie in together. I think you sort of reflect on what's blocking you, what's getting in your way, what do you need to fast from, right? And pray about that and repent of that. Repentance just means to turn around, go in a different direction. And I think it's Tony said, like fasting and almsgiving, those practices and reading Scripture enable us to do that. We get rid of the things that are blocking us. We focus on the wider community. I do think our coin things used to be for Primates World Relief and Development was to give away. It wasn't for the parish, right? The money you collected was.
I just remember, I know we've been talking about them, but the memory of the feeling and looking at them from what I just had it, I was like, wait a minute, I remember those. Anyway, sorry. I was like, the memory comes into your head, you're like, I remember the coins, like you fit them into the little things there.
Slots. Yeah. And they tear sometimes.
And I was about to say, I could never get them in the slot properly, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, and I think all those things are meant to help you restart. It's like a reset button, right? In your year. That's why I love it. Like, who doesn't want a do-over? Who doesn't need to stop and say, hey, my life is not going necessarily the way I thought it would or should. And this is a time set aside to help you do over, help you begin again on Easter. So
yeah, a time of deep reflection of just who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it. I mean, that can't be bad, right? Like to take some time.
Yes, actually, it's a very special, unique opportunity to reflect on the meaning of our creation, the purpose of our creation, the purpose of our existence in this world, in our life journey. So we are deeply connected with our Creator, no doubt about it, and we are deeply responsible towards the other members of His creation. So this is why fasting is not only a reminder about, our dependency on the blessings of God to continue our survival, our existence, but also a reminder of our responsibilities towards the earth. Like, do not waste water, do not waste food. Try to minimize, your waste in this earth. Try to care for other people who may have less means. So another important aspect of Ramadan fasting is that we increase in charity. For instance, every year we decide, it's calculated depending on the local region you are living in, the minimum amount that one person is supposed to donate to a collective fund that ends up being distributed to the poor and needy in the community who cannot afford, two times of eating, So we are required, it's an obligatory charity, and it's $20 per person for this year for St. John's, Newfoundland. So we collect this money and we distribute it, to the rest of the community where there may be people who are, experiencing poverty, and especially in this time where the food prices are so high, it becomes even more important, significant in addressing poverty in our communities.
Well, and $20 a person, if you talk about a few thousand people, it quickly adds up, right?
Yes.
And there's a universality to these things, like whether it's Lent or Ramadan. I think in about a month's time, Passover is happening. Yeah. These values, whether you identify as a Christian or as Muslim or part of an organized religion, in our world today, we can all connect on doing something good for our neighbor, caring for creation, caring for one another, being other-focused, and how do I need to do some inner work and self-work to grow more into the person that I am or more the person God created me to be. These themes, I think, are in a secular society like we're living in, these are themes that I think religions present that everybody can connect to, whether they're part of the religion or not. And those are, I think, good common ground things for us to, as a society, to contemplate.
Right. I mean, it's community leadership lessons, right? For
exactly.
anyone. You just look and say, oh, well, that's raising money, bringing a plate of food to someone, raising money, having looking at yourself and how you are and how you function in the world and trying to be better. All great things.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when you sort of speak about the that kind of striving to be a better person and serving creation, and the taking up aspect of Lent. When most people, like you say, it's a secular society. The one thing that I'll still hear people talking about who are not connected in any way actively to a faith community is giving up for Lent. People still use that kind of language, but I don't hear as much someone saying, I'm going to take up more contemplative prayer for Lent. I'm going to take up more charitable giving for Lent. But you do hear the language around, I'm giving up chocolate for Lent. I'm giving up, smokes for Lent, or I'm giving up sugar or candy for Lent. So you'll hear that kind of language, I think, from a lot of people. But you don't hear that other aspect, which I think is really core to, for people who take their faith seriously, to the seasons of preparation.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the reasons why Lent, in our culture gets such a bad rap, right? Because we only associate it with bad things, like having to eat food we didn't like, or having to give up food we did like. It was, it's like, it's depressing hymns, depressing services, repent, without sort of thinking, well, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Like we see it sort of as an end in itself, but it's not. It's a means.
That's right.
It's like
move to renewal. Like I'm sure Ramadan is not an end in itself. It's meant to grow, help you grow in your spiritual life.
Exactly.
Right? But when we see it just as a thing in itself, we lose its potential.
Yeah, in our industry, what happens is people read the headline, but they don't read the whole story, right? And so you're like, don't let the headline distract you. There's a whole news story beneath that with all those details.
Yeah, right.
Aisha, you're going to say?
Thank you so much for highlighting, this. As I said earlier, Ramadan fasting is only a means to a higher end.
Yeah.
To become more mindful of our Creator and remember our responsibilities towards His creation. And the $20 per person donations during Ramadan is not the only compulsory charity that Muslims practice. We are also required, to donate 2.5% of our wealth surplus, after meeting the needs of our families and everything, if we still have a surplus, from our wealth, we donate 2.5% of that as a compulsory charity. And I believe if all practicing Muslims were to follow that, rule sincerely and honestly, at least in some parts of the Muslim world, we wouldn't have that much poverty. And the same applies for non-Muslim world. Unfortunately, there is a lack of care and empathy for other people. We forget that we share this earth. We don't own it.
Yeah, I mean that cuts from if we're talking poverty, food insecurity, also in this world of climate change and taking care of the earth, right? I mean, it cuts through all of that.
Yep.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
What about almsgiving? We talked about coins growing up and everything else, but nowadays, when we look at whether it's like you're Anglican or you're Catholic, what are you seeing for almsgiving nowadays around Lent and the conversations around it?
I know that one of the things about Lent is that even though it's focused on this time period, the themes of Lent really are universal and year-round.
Yeah.
Right? So, for example, I think of at St. Teresa's, we have a food bank in our church, right? And we offer food hampers and all kinds of things. There's always a focus around Christmas time around food hampers, Lent, not so much, but it kind of quietly continues. Like there's no big food drive because the need is always there. But there's that steady kind of, we'll certainly make sure that people have as Easter Sunday comes together, that people have, something a bit more substantial. But I think it's a call to say that the needs of the poor, the needs of the earth, the needs of society are year-round. Lent kind of calls us to that, but then it says, okay, it doesn't stop when Lent is over. It's supposed to keep going, right? It's not something that you just do for the 40 days, right?
And I think lots of different parishes do different things, so it's not universal. I know, having served in many places in over 30 years, like sometimes we take up a certain group that needs, like the church I'm a part of now, I've been collecting things for the Single Parents Association, right? So you might have something like that. I've done years where instead of the coins, we've given out jars and had every day think about people here and give, and so you have them do different things on a daily basis. And some people will raise money and buy things from PWRDF, which is our Promise World Relief and Development Fund. You can sort of buy a goat or buy a farm or, things like that. So I do think individual groups of people do still do those things, even though they don't have the cards. So there is an emphasis in it, depending on, where you are and what the needs are in your local community.
Nationally, the Canadian Catholic Association of Development and Peace has an actual Lenten fundraising campaign for a specific need in the world. And so all Catholic churches will collect for that on a specific Sunday, on Solidarity Sunday, which was last weekend, I believe. And so that's a national focus, so there is that as well in our tradition, yeah.
We've got John Newell's on the line with a memory of Lent. Hi, John.
Yeah, hi, how are you?
Goodbye. Hit us with this memory now.
Oh, the memory I had is that we had to give up chocolate.
There you go.
Yeah.
I was wondering how did the chocolate factor into your guest there?
All right, perfect. I'll put it to him. And,
I was wondering about with Easter coming, of course, associated with chocolate, so we had to cut down on the chocolate. We were only allowed to have chocolate on Easter Sunday, right?
Oh, yeah. No, I've got I said earlier in the show, that was one of the things we would talk about, too, as kids, right? Giving up, and then you'd get your dose at the end of it when the Easter. I'm not sure how the Easter Bunny plays into this, but depending on who we ask. Thanks for the call, and I'll bring it to the guests.
Okay, I'm going to hang up, will I?
Right, yeah, sure. Yes, please. Thank you, buddy.
I was going to ask you about the chocolate, right?
Oh, yeah. Stay on the line and keep listening, and we'll get to it, because there's only 5 minutes left in the show, so we'll hop into it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Cheers. So there you go, right?
No pun intended.
Yeah, exactly. Hop into it. So yeah, again, we're hearing chocolate, and yes, then there's the whole other bit when you get some bunnies and chocolate at the end of everything, which is kind of, I guess, a side story. How does that even work? I've never even thought. Everyone's just kind of like looking at me like, stop talking about the Easter Bunny, Adam.
Well, I think the giving up of chocolate is all part of that giving up of sweets. And I know a friend of mine who said his mom just stopped baking sweets during Lent. So she decided their family was giving up sweets for Lent, and it was not just store-bought candy, but she wasn't going to be baking cakes, cookies, pies. So I think it's all part of that giving up sugar. And another thing that we sort of didn't talk about in terms of like the fasting was also fasting from entertainment. So that was a big part of traditional Lent keeping. There was no cards during Lent. You know, if there was no game playing during Lent, there was no dances during Lent, except for the St. Patrick's Day dance.
Well,
that was
things are
Saints Day.
Yeah, that's right. That was
Saints Day were cheat days.
That's exactly right. So, and that's something that people recalled as well. You know, they couldn't play cards, they couldn't play checkers. Games were put away in their family. No one got married during Lent. It was just a time. It was just traditions around keeping the season holy was putting pause on a lot. And now some people I spoke to said there was no weddings during Lent because there couldn't be a dance. and it's not a wedding unless you have a dance now, Adam.
There you go. See? Weddings, dancing, every so often in Newfoundland and Labrador culture, something called, I believe the historic term is car bar back in the day for outside that you used to be able to check out. So all that would be put to the side.
That's right.
I got it. All right. So what's for the rest of your weeks now? What are your own personal plans for this week?
Well, we have in our church, this is Holy Week, and so that began yesterday with Palm Sunday, where we celebrate the Lord's Passion and his entrance into Jerusalem, and we have palm branches. And then we move through the week until Holy Thursday, where it's the Mass of the Lord's Supper, then a service on Good Friday, the day Jesus died. Holy Saturday is the Easter Vigil, so it's a big celebration in churches at night after sundown, and then, of course, Easter Sunday. So it's a busy week in terms of liturgy and church preparations. Yeah.
Actually, what about yourself as we approach Eid?
Okay, so we are now in the second half of Ramadan. Although the entire month is very sacred, and we tried our best to focus on what is good and what is useful, beneficial for our spirituality and connection with our Lord. The last 10 days are even more special because there is a mystery around it. Because in the Quran, it's not specified which specific night. You know, there is a specific night called Laylatul Qadr, the night of power, during which, all sins are forgiven. People are, get what they are seeking out from all these Ramadan, spiritual experiences. So during the last 10 days, we focus more, on reading the Quran, praying at our mosques, so we really minimize, our worldly affairs, we focus more on prayer, worship, charity, and, connecting with family in meaningful ways instead of spending, wasting our time in watching TVs, in social media or other stuff, right? And there's something that I forgot to mention. Ramadan fasting is prescribed only for those people who can afford it medically, right? If you are a healthy individual, grown up, who can afford medically to fast, you should be fasting. Children are exempt from fasting. Sick people who are on a medication, regular medication, are also exempt from fasting. Actually, when I was coming to the studio earlier today, I ended up with a Muslim driver. And while we were chatting, he mentioned that unfortunately, he feels sad that he cannot fast for medical reasons. He's going to have a major surgery. So I invite all our listeners to make a prayer for him. I hope he will recover very soon and then he will settle down back to Ramadan as much as he can.
Joanne, yourself, final thoughts? We're almost out of time here today. Final thoughts?
I mean, I think this final week is, for most of us, a day. We take a special time for prayer every day. Clergy. We often say we pray for clergy this week because they are going to be doing at least 1, 2, sometimes 3 liturgies a day. And it's a heavy week, but it's a time to stop and refocus.
Bonnie, last word for you, 30 seconds.
I think that it's, again, for me, I find it really interesting to see the commonalities between traditions and how the similar vein runs through most people's religious practices, and the essence of that kind of spiritual development, the journeying towards something that is bigger and outside yourself, and that deepening of your awareness of that and your own connections with, the universe, however you want to think about that language, whether it's, God, creation, the universe, however you think about that in your own mind. I think that's really an interesting aspect of what we're hearing here today.
Thank you. We're out of time. Thank you all for this chat. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for
having us.
And we got one little note here from Jane saying, Good Friday food. I was surprised no one mentioned Arctic steak, which is what my mother called a whale meat. So there you go. Another one, I guess that fits in the seal category for Good Friday, everyone. Maybe not anymore. Anyways, I move on. Thank you all for listening to this show. Tomorrow, it's a housing show focused on rural parts of the province. We'll talk about the provincial budget, the federal one, and what else needs to be done to solve housing insecurity. Thanks.